Hello, I'm Grandin Gill, the Academic Director of the Doctor of Business Administration program at the University of South Florida's Muma College of Business. This is one of a series of videos that I've created about DBA programs in general and the Muma DBA in particular. In this video, we are going to look at the question of how does a DBA differ from a PhD in business? Let me begin by clarifying something. When I use the term DBA in this video, I'm really talking about executive doctorates in business. These doctorates come under many different names, such as Doctor of Management, Executive Doctor in Business, or Doctor of Business Administration. The programs that I'm referring to are generally about 3 years long. They have a cohort structure, and they're designed for working executives. PhD programs, on the other hand, in business tend to be 4 to 5 years long, if you're lucky. They're full-time programs. They are not intended for working professionals, and they're designed for careers in academia. Having made that clear, let's look at some of the criteria by which PhD programs can be differentiated from DBA programs. The first thing I would point out is that the core of knowledge of these programs is fundamentally different. In a PhD program, what you're mainly interested in learning is the most important core of the research literature within your particular function. So if you are a marketing PhD, you're going to be looking at a very different core from a finance PhD or an information systems PhD. But most of what you need to know is contained in the research literature. In an executive doctorate, your goal is to synthesize knowledge from many sources. Yes, we include the academic literature, but we also need to think about the trade literature. We need to think about our personal experience, and normally we are doing this in response to a particular decision or problem that is facing us, as opposed to a hole in the literature, which would be much more common in a PhD. The second area is how we communicate the research product. In a PhD, what we're trying to do is communicate to a fairly narrow group of specialists who are interested in the same area that we are, using top research journals, which all have a particular structure and way of communicating. So we communicate through publications to a fairly select group of individuals. When we talk about the DBA, when we find things out in research in response to a decision or problem, we need to be able to communicate to a very, very large range of stakeholders. These might include employees, superiors, researchers, certainly, colleagues, HR, customers, suppliers. The research we conduct could be relevant to all of these, and as a result, we may end up having to change the way we communicate depending upon what group we are speaking to. A third area where research PhDs differ from executive doctorates is in the type of problems that are most intriguing to us. In the case of PhDs, what we'd really like to do is find some area within the literature where there is a gap. We would like to find a problem whose solution appears to be enduring in nature. It takes 3 years to publish in a premier journal. You don't want a problem that goes away in 2. And we want problems whose findings seem likely to generalize, because if the findings are very narrow, very few people will be interested in them. Now, it's a real question as to how many problems that are both enduring in time and likely to generalize actually exist in business that have not been solved by practice. But that's not the researcher's problem, because the researcher is focused on what's in the literature, not necessarily what is known by practice. When we're talking about executive doctorates, we're often talking about using research methods to investigate problems that are transitory in nature and where the generalizability may not make that much of a difference because you're trying to solve the problem in the specific context of your organization. What does rigor mean? Well, to a PhD student, rigor is likely to mean adherence to a set of research methods that have been vetted by prior researchers and have been considered acceptable. Research is very, very closely tied to the methodology, and rigor reflects how well we have applied that methodology. And since research practices can differ from discipline to discipline, there is a good chance that what is considered rigor will vary as well. Now, in some of the hard sciences, like physics and chemistry, you can pretty much count on rigor producing replicability, which is to say, if you do the experiment in one lab using a particular protocol, you will find that if you take it to another lab and use the same protocol and equipment, you should come up with the same results. Unfortunately, in the social sciences, and particularly in business research, that has not really happened. What we find is you can use the same research protocol on a problem that seems like a very similar problem across two organizations and get very, very different results. So as a consequence, our focus on rigor really focuses on methodology as opposed to focusing on replicability. Now, when we move over to the DBA, the meaning of rigor is really one of choosing from a collection of research methods to try to solve a particular problem locally and choosing the best fit between these research methods. We're not worried about what the journals will like. What we're worried about is what solution gets us closest to the heart of the problem and allows us to take action accordingly. So our conception of rigor is very different, though both involve using a sensible research methodology. The final area is the challenge of education. And if you look at a PhD program, they are typically taking inexperienced full-time students. It's not unusual for PhD students to come directly out of undergraduate and teach them all the things they need to be successful in an academic research career. Some of these things include the research methods that they'll want to apply within their particular discipline, the nature of business, because many, perhaps most of our PhD students have very, very limited exposure to business and really don't know what business is about. Now, mind you, we teach them about business using the disciplinary core knowledge, that is to say, the academic literature, which may or may not reflect the way businesses actually operate. We teach our PhD students how to write for top-tier journals. Nowadays at research institutions, it's not enough just to get published. You really have to get published in a set of relatively narrow journals if you want to get promoted and have a career as tenured in a high-end research university. That's a formidable skill because most of these journals have very, very low acceptance rates. Often 5 to 10% of articles that get submitted get accepted. We also need to give our students basic teaching skills because while research is the passion of most PhD students and faculty for that matter, teaching is the bread and butter. If we don't have tuition revenue, we cannot continue doing our research. Finally, we need to teach the students the social skills necessary to survive in an academic community. The academic community can be very, very strange in its behavior, and as a consequence, if a student goes out into the world with his or her PhD and behaves the way he or she might in a normal business or a normal social club, there are going to be a lot of problems. And so we have to socialize our PhD students. Well, this is a lot of work, and that's one of the reasons why PhDs often take 5 or more years of full-time effort to complete. Now, how about the executive doctorate, the DBA? What are we trying to teach in one of these programs? Well, basically, what we're trying to do is we're trying to teach them the research skills that they will need to do problem solving in the context of their organization. We are not going to teach them about business because, quite honestly, our attempts to teach them would be laughable, since most of these programs require a great deal of experience coming in, which suggests that they know a whole lot more about operating a business than we do. We do not have to socialize them to the academic environment because that's not normally where they are heading. We don't have to convince them to write for peer-reviewed journals of the highest tier because that will make little or no difference in a professional career. Indeed, if I wanted to be sure that my research was hidden from practice, I think that publishing it in premier academic journals is probably better than encryption in terms of making sure that nobody finds it. As a result, we really don't have to teach our DBA candidates nearly as much as the PhD candidates because our DBA candidates come in with so much of the knowledge they need. As a result, a 3-year program that they take while they are working is still quite adequate for the mission that we have established for these programs. Thank you very much for watching this video. If you have any further questions about the Muma program or about DBA programs in general, I hope you will feel free to contact us. The best way to do so is at our email address, muma-dba@usf.edu. Thanks again for watching.